Hey everyone, welcome to a very special edition of the Ionic Show. Today we have Mr. Ionitron himself, Adam Bradley, lead developer of the Ionic Framework, joining us. And today we're going to be talking about the amazingly awesome, very special release of Ionic 2. What it is, why we built it, what are some of the huge upgrades that you'll find in it, and where we're taking Ionic next. So with that out of the way, let's get the show started. All right, everyone, so before we jump into all the nitty-gritty details of Ionic 2, I think we should just take a step back and look at the great 2.5 years that Ionic 1 has had since we released the pretty rough version of Ionic 1 Alpha at the end of November 2013. So since then, there have been over 1.8 million mobile apps built with Ionic, which is just crazy. These are being built by startups like Swirkit that have millions of installs, 5-star ratings. They've been featured by Apple, Google, and Amazon. To big enterprise companies that are tracking billions of dollars in expensive inventory with mission-critical apps in kind of their own internal app stores. And now we're starting to see companies build very popular mobile websites with Ionic because they're realizing it's not enough to have responsive websites or even to push people to the app store. Like, they have to have a great mobile web experience. So there have been a lot of apps built, and Ionic's been out for 2.5 years, and it's let us kind of learn how to build a really great mobile web framework.
That's right. There's been a lot of technology change recently, such as ES6, TypeScript, Angular2. And so with these changes, we've been able to kind of think about how can we take Ionic further and really improve its performance, take advantage of all these new technologies, and really see what we can do with our lessons learned from this stress testing of this great framework, and again, take it to the future.
So we've heard a lot of kind of shock from the Angular community when they heard about Angular 2 coming out. Right. At NG Europe, it was announced that things like controllers were going away or dying. Scope was dying. Directives were dying. So if you're an Angular 1 developer looking ahead to Angular 2, what about Angular 2 is going to be different? Like, what am I going to have to learn to build Angular 2 apps?
Right. Well, what's cool about Angular 2 is really all these things that you have been using with Angular 1 is kind of getting removed. It's no longer a concept you need to remember, this boilerplate code. You're now cutting out the stuff that really is not necessary anymore. So with Angular 2, it really simplifies things, and it's using just standard classes or standard ES6, ES7 features from the standardized process. So rather than learning these patterns that are made up by Angular back in 2009, you're now kind of just learning JavaScript, which is already standardized. So that's the coolest thing I've seen so far with Angular 2.
So if I'm I know Angular 1, I know how to build controllers, I know how to build directives. What do I do if I'm going to build a component in Angular 2? How does that all blend together?
Well, what we've seen so far is when we're porting Angular 1 code to Angular 2 is that you're really just kind of removing code because a lot of it's not necessary, like I was saying earlier. So what you see here is a component that is really just, again, just an ES6 class, JavaScript class. Something that looks new to you right now, but it's really kind of what you're going to start writing today and moving forward, as this is, again, a standardized just JavaScript class. But it looks new to you, but don't be afraid, because this is kind of the JavaScript moving forward. But really, sorry, I forgot the question.
Well, that's okay. The question was, what happens when I need to build a component? And so I've got a class, and I'd have my directive kind of wrapped up in my function call. So how would I bring that over into ES6 land in Angular 2?
Okay, so now that it's kind of just a component and you just have a class, instead of using $scope, controllers, services, factories, you're just really kind of using member variables on that component.
So it's just instance data, object-oriented instance.
Yeah, exactly. Data. So if you're familiar with object-oriented programming, you're really just going to be oh, this makes complete sense to me. And really, if you're just new to programming, new to Angular in general, all of it's going to be really simple concepts. It's probably the Angular 1 developers that are kind of thrown off, but give it a second. And
I think people forgot how hard Angular 1 was to learn.
Right.
I had to take a month off of work just to actually learn it. Okay, let's be honest, it wasn't the easiest thing to understand. And it didn't seem like any of those concepts translate over to JavaScript, in the broader ecosystem.
Right, and again, is those made-up patterns that they did in 2009, well before this stuff was kind of standardized.
So I've heard a lot about TypeScript, and it seems like some people are using ES6, some people are using ES7, some people maybe even think they're using ES8. Sure. But what is TypeScript, and how does that play into everything?
So TypeScript is pretty neat. where it allows you to add types to variables. And all right, so big deal. You're making it sure that's a number and it's not a string. It's going to throw errors. That's really not what I'm like excited about. What I'm really excited about is like when you're building a large application, you're quickly seeing it quickly shows you problems that your application is going to have. It's not showing you like, oh, this should have been a number. That's not the stuff I care about. It's that when you have a large team, a large application, you really grow this source code and just like with using Java or C# or any sort of object-oriented language, it's easier to kind of refactor and make sense about all of this.
So it's kind of like a little bit of a static analysis.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I also want to make sure that people understand that this is not a required thing. This is something that if you want to use it for your team or your application from small to large, it's entirely up to you. If you don't want to add types, please feel free not to use types whatsoever.
So it seems like something that enterprise developers who are maybe more familiar with Java, C#, in big teams would really benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. And we ourselves, Angular2 is all developed in TypeScript. Ionic2 is all developed in TypeScript, which then adds types to all of our, so we provide the types definitions so that when you're using it in your IDEs, such as Visual Studio Code, Sublime, all of the major editors.
I use Atom.
The Atom.
Atom, okay.
Right? All of the major editors, you're going to get the IntelliSense, you're going to get the auto-completion. It's going to be able to go straight to the definition. So with Ionic 2, you have all this stuff already built for you, which is really cool, actually.
Yeah. So I think people, my first reaction from TypeScript was it kind of let me harden my code a little bit. I could optionally, choose to use it later, or I could start right from the beginning. But either way, I was catching errors way before I would catch them at runtime, which is nice.
Right, exactly. And we kind of started out not using TypeScript at first, and as we started adding it, that's where a lot of like stuff that would have been thrown as undefined, it's not a function, all these common errors you would have missed normally without a runtime, they start to come up. And so I'm glad that we started using TypeScript for Ionic 2 itself.
Yeah. So the other thing that I've kind of heard a little bit about are the templating changes, and how does that impact Ionic 2? How does that impact people who are familiar with Angular's templating syntax? Because from what I've seen, maybe it's not quite as drastic.
Yeah, it's actually, again, like it looks different. Like you're like, what the heck? It was all ng whatever. Now it's all these got parentheses and brackets. What's going on?
And the asterisk.
Yeah, just trust me on this. Give it 5 minutes of using it and you're going to be like, oh, now I know exactly what this does. You don't have to read the documentation of like, oh, it's expecting an expression, but this one isn't expecting a string. This one is actually calling a method. Now when you look directly at that code, just right within your HTML file, you're like, oh, this is calling off a method. Or this one is adding a property down to the child component. It all just makes a lot more sense now when you look at it. What else is really cool about it is because of this syntax, IDEs are going to be able to help you out. IDEs are going to be able to say, give you code completion of like what should go there, and also throw errors when something doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think my reaction was that ng repeat should have been called ng4 a long time ago.
Right. Again, I think that's just way back to the Stone Age.
The Stone Age, yeah.
The Stone Age before JavaScript was a thing, and we kind of made it work, kind of.
So on that note, the one last thing about templating is, what about two-way data binding? What's going on with that?
Two-way data binding. So I think since Angular 1 came out, it's been realized that two-way data binding isn't the grand all best thing in the world for performance reasons. But it doesn't mean it's gone away. So for form inputs, it's still there. And with this syntax here, you can see that it allows the input, like the text to go in and out using this new syntax that they have for...
So it's kind of like an event with a binding, kind of.
Right, exactly. But without everything having to be two-way binding, and that really drastically increases the performance.
So let's talk a little bit about timeframe, because I've heard that Angular 2 is beta. When is it coming out in a more stable release? Does this mean I shouldn't use it yet, or I shouldn't use Ionic 2 yet? How does that kind of going to play out?
So yeah, it just hit beta just recently. I believe they're on beta 1 right now. And there's a lot of big things coming yet. So what you see in the betas today is far from kind of where they're going with the next release, which I don't have a direct line to know when that date happens. I don't think anybody does, to include Mishko and Igor. But when that...
they probably don't even know either.
No, they have no idea. But it's actually looking really great. We've been fortunate to help out Angular, provide our feedback, and really have weekly meetings with them of like help direct how Angular 2 is being built and kind of seeing where we've seen weaknesses. So we've been fortunate to be a large part of that process. But as far as what you're seeing today in the beta versions, is a large chunk of that code is going to get removed entirely because much of that code is going to move to the build step. So like template compiling doesn't need to happen on the fly in the browser anymore. It can actually happen static analysis, offline template compiling at build time. So that means all that chunk of code that was doing it on the fly gets moved out of it. Same thing for, what's it called? Provider dependency injection.
Yeah.
Same thing. That stuff is going to get moved out too, hopefully. And it's also to meet that goal of 10 kilobyte payload for their Hello World app, which is a crazy goal, but it's pretty awesome. And in talking with Igor, he was explaining all the ways that they're going to try to pull this off. And so it's a lofty goal, but even if they get it down to 30K payload, that's just amazing.
Well, and those optimizations will dramatically, improve the bootstrapping time.
Right. And it's already, the bootstrapping time has drastically improved from Angular 1. And with these happening, where the template compiling doesn't have to happen at Bootstrap, and it's just kind of hard-coded into your output, Bootstrap is going to be lightning fast.
Nice. So I think the point is that Angular 2 is going to be a big improvement. A lot of Angular developers are going to feel like they still understand the basic concepts, which I kind of made me realize like Angular is more of an architectural pattern. It's a way to build mobile web apps, and it now has 2 different implementations. So really, it's still Angular all the way down. It's just like, one's using new JavaScript techniques, and one was kind of built in an era before standardized advanced JavaScript. So my impression was and is that, a couple days you'll feel right at home. It's going to be a little bit weird at first, but you'll probably love it and not want to go back to the old version.
And the stuff that you liked about Angular 1 is still there in Angular 2. The stuff you didn't like about Angular 1, it has been cleaned up and removed.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
So enough about Angular 2. Let's move on to some of the design changes that Ionic 2 has seen. Maybe why don't we start with some of the functional design changes that really are going to impact developers. And I think navigation is probably the one that's changed the most.
Right, absolutely. So that's probably the biggest area for improvement from versions 1 to 2. Really, we used UI router in Ionic 1, and it was great for simple applications. A lot of our demo apps that we built with it worked just fine. But the second you want to start getting complex, and the second you start really wanting to build out a great navigation, that's where it breaks down, and that's where its complexity kind of hurts it after a while.
Right. So I think I remember a lot of people struggling with things like, how do I pop open a modal and then have another navigation context inside the modal?
Yeah, and with UI router, you were so tied to the URL. So you need this little tiny string needs to map to this complex navigation, and that's kind of where it broke down. So
yeah, it's challenging because if you have a modal and you're also having a navigation box behind it, you kind of have 2 URLs. That would map to 2 URLs, right? So it just kind of felt like it didn't quite work for the kinds of navigation that a mobile app usually has.
Yeah, and with that, so that's why it's kind of given us the opportunity to really study how iOS and Android are doing things with their navigation, and they're kind of using more of a push-pop system, meaning that if you think of your applications, you're in the App Store application. As you navigate between pages, you push on a new page, and you can infinitely push on new pages. And us web developers, we're kind of hard-coded to think I want to go to a certain file. I want to go to a .html file, and that is one page, and that's always going to be the URL for this page.
So to use kind of an analogy like you just brought up with the App Store app on iPhone, I can view the Minecraft app. I can view it on tab 1 if it's a featured app. I can view it in the Browse tab because I'm going through a category of top games. So it's that page exists. It could exist in many different places and be identified through different URLs if we had that.
Right, exactly. And a page is very it's very generic. It's just very dumb. It can load anywhere. It could be inside of a modal. It could be inside of its standalone page. It could be inside of a tab, a modal inside of a tab, inside of a side menu. It really doesn't matter because the page itself is a self-contained thing, and it's not tied to this structured URL.
So let's actually talk details with Ionic 2. So kind of in Ionic 1, we had the IonNav view, and it seems like we have something similar in Ionic 2, and it's just a little bit more programmatic. Yeah,
so we have IonNav still, and what you do with that is just like with our push-pop system, you're pushing on new pages. And the IonNav itself is very, again, standalone, just like how a page or a view is. where you could have a nav inside of a nav, inside of tabs, inside of modal, inside of a side menu. The nav itself does not know that it's a parent or child. And with that power, like with being able to decouple that from the hierarchy of how the navigation works, or the application works, it gives you the developer a lot of power in how to structure their app and how to say, all right, I'm 3 levels deep, but I want the highest level to navigate back one. They can programmatically do that.
So I have a page and it's inside of a tab, which is inside of something else that has so there's maybe 3 navigation stacks.
Sure.
My page will get injected the closest navigation controller, and then I can use that navigation controller to push new pages on, and it'll stay in that context. Or I could probably climb up the tree and do something a little bit crazier if I needed to reset a root.
Right, exactly. It's like a common use case would be an app starts at the login page, and the login page is just a boring standalone page with no header. You log in, and then it comes slide in the tabs page. So the tabs container is its own page itself, but inside of that has 3 different pages or 3 different tabs, and inside of each tab is many different pages. But each one themselves is not aware that any of that is happening.
Yeah, and actually you bring up tabs, which is interesting because I think this shows a fun way that Ionic is actually superior in some ways to the native APIs, because Apple doesn't really let you easily. Actually, I don't think they let you push tabs onto a navigation stack. It has to kind of be the root.
Right.
So a lot of people struggle in native land. I have a login page. How do I navigate to a tabs page? And so they'll usually use modals. So Ionic kind of lets you do the native navigation style, but also expand on what you could do natively, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, and back to the login tabs example, they can do, a user can be logged in, and when they hit log out, that's where the developer would climb up to the highest level nav stack and then pop that whole tabs page to go back to the login page.
Right, and so we've heard a lot about push pop. What's happening with URLs?
So yeah, URLs. All of this that we were talking about makes it sound like we've ditched the URL completely. Well, that's not the case. Because we're so programmatic of how an application is built by the developer, it still allows us to have kind of an internal navigation stack of all these different navigations and all the views that are inside of them. And from that, we're able to then inform the browser of okay, the developer wanted us to go to these, go forward 3 steps. And when that's done, it would then notify the browser okay, we're now at this URL. So Ionic itself does not require a router. And with that design decision, it allows us, Ionic, to really become very powerful.
But it still could work with the new component router in Angular 2.
Exactly. So it works great with the new Angular 2 router. So the way we see it is the URL is kind of like it's the state manager of it's for the initial state. So
kind of like a breadcrumb to get back there, like a deep link.
Yes. So we have not ditched URLs. URLs are a big part of the web, and I'm firm believer in the web.
The web.
Thank you. Firm believer in the web and how the URLs play with that. So with that, again, it loads the initial state, and then it keeps track of where you're at. So if you were to hit refresh or you shared that link with someone, it's going to be able to load the app at where you left it off.
Yeah, so I think the example that I like to use is, let's say we navigated to your contact page.
Right.
And we could be in that contact page a million different ways that we got there from the app. But if you reloaded that or sent a deep link, it would always load your contact page. It just maybe wouldn't have the crazy history that the user took to get there while they were using it. That's only relevant during the session.
Right, exactly. But what's cool is you could actually a developer could build out okay, I want them to go to this page, and you could have then the back 3 pages would be, the about us and the info page. So again, developers have a lot of control of what is in every single stack.
Yeah, and now that you bring that up, Spotify actually kind of a big, really popular app. I'm a huge obsessive fanboy of Spotify. But what they did was interesting, where when you loaded up the app, they used to just throw you back into your all music page. But now they actually try to reconstruct your last 3 pages. So if you were on your favorite playlist, it would actually bring you back there and refill the history. And if you paid attention, you notice that it's not how it used to work. So they're doing that because they think it's a better user experience, but it's because they wanted to and it felt right for the app. And it might not feel right for everyone's app. So it just gives you a lot more control.
Yeah, and so developers could do the same thing with Ionic. If there was a certain URL that users hit, you could say, because they came to this landing page, let's build out this navigation stack for them.
Sure. So enough about navigation. let's maybe move on to some of the new components in Ionic 2 because we want to give people new things, new fun things. We want to solve problems for them. And I think there's a lot of examples of how Ionic 2 does solve it from a component standpoint.
Right. So on that note, before we completely go into components, I do also want to mention how navigation and the side menus are drastically fixed too, because the way Ionic 1 worked was that a side menu wrapped all the content and always knew how to slide things back and forth. But that caused problems with complex navigations. If they had multiple left menus or they had left menus that changed out for different reasons, or they had side menus inside of tabs, and then that would have a side menu. The old structure of having the side menu wrap things really caused a lot of issues. So we fixed that in Ionic 2 by making it a sibling and really can be anywhere. So you can have any number of side menus. They can any number of them can be enabled or disabled. So again, a lot more power, and you don't have to. The side menus can be found from any component.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a better fit for like the material design overlay style.
Yeah, right.
Which feels more like it's not a wrapper; it's just like an extraneous kind of menu.
Yeah, it's always a sibling kind of to the content, and also it also switches per the platform you're on. So iOS has kind of iOS feel, material design feel for Android devices, and also that's configurable.
Yep. Cool. So side menu is going to be awesome. It's probably going to solve a million problems for you guys. Navigation's better. Every time I talk to people and I explain the changes to them, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's like I had to hack around that."
Yeah.
And so I love hearing that. It's like, okay, we're actually solving a real problem people have had, and I think you're going to love it. So navigation, huge improvement. Let's talk about some of these new components.
Yeah. So the biggest thing we did with our components was we really kind of brought material design front and center. Before we designed Ionic 1, kind of an iOS feel, and then afterwards, material design came out after we had created Ionic 1. So then we kind of like implemented, and made a couple of CSS changes here and there to kind of give it a material design feel. But since then, with Ionic 2, we've been able to really split apart the two different themes entirely. And so there's not material design built on top of iOS. It's two separate CSS files, you look at the source code, two separate Sass files for every single component, completely modular. Which then also allows us to really break apart, add in more styles and really make it easy for users to customize.
Yeah, because I think it was getting a little bit challenging having to override some of the deep class nesting to get your own styles. I think the feedback from Ionic 1 users was it was too hard to customize because like our selectors were a little bit too complicated.
Yeah, so with 2, we've really reduced the selectors drastically. And because we're not trying to have them both run at the exact same time, there's not each other having to step on each other and having to override. So if you take a look at like the CSS now, it's so much easier to really override yourselves. You can use Sass, you can just use your classic CSS. It just makes it a lot easier.
So awesome. And I hear that forms have gotten a really big improvement in lists and some of the other elements.
Yeah, right. So we've a lot of lessons learned of how developers were using forms and what they wanted to do with them. So we made sure that we really structured them in this new sense that allows like toggles like multiple select elements inside of a ion item. Multiple, you can have two text items in the same thing. So the control is a lot more control than what there was before. And probably the biggest pain point was the native elements and how browsers reacted.
Especially select.
Yeah. So the select element has always been kind of a challenge with mobile browsers because they all kind of act differently. Each browser acts differently of what happens when you click that element, whether it's on touch start or mouse start. Like there's all different, especially the prevent default or how to manually focus it. So these were all challenges that Ionic had to try to solve. So with Ionic 2, we just kind of avoided all those issues that just already plagued us from the beginning and really just kind of created our own Ion select component, and it's drastically helped.
Yeah, and I think if you're the user on a mobile web browser, especially on iOS, like the select is not friendly. Like you kind of open it and then you're stuck. You're not sure, do I click the page? Do I, tap done? And I think the native control didn't really give you enough the control like it would in a typical native app.
And it was rarely something you'd see in a native app. So yeah, we kind of wanted to avoid the native select element to begin with and create one that we think is more natural to native apps.
Right. So the select element's gotten a major overhaul. Yep. What about things like pop-ups and alerts and some of those kind of presentational user interfaces?
Yeah, so with Ionic 1, we built them out over time, and they kind of formed their own little APIs over time. So that's why it's been great with Ionic 2 that we kind of studied what people were actually using with them, and we're able to really kind of simplify it and have this common API that all modals, action sheets, alerts, prompts, confirms, all of them share the same look and feel. So it's easy to understand how they work, how to close them dynamically, how to find them quickly, how to find them like programmatically and close them. And even like submitting the inputs, or after like a prompt would submit inputs and a confirm submit inputs, it makes it easier just with this new API that we have.
And it sounds like along with form inputs, which are going to be more natural, we're sticking with native scrolling everywhere.
Yep.
And fixing some of the issues that Ionic 1 had with it, because
Yeah.
just the foundation here doesn't have the same problems. And I think some of that seems to be related to like tap and like click events, right?
Yeah, exactly. So because we were using JavaScript scrolling to begin with, because it kind of solved a lot of problems we had with older browsers. But that's no longer really a problem that we have with today's browsers and the ones that we support. So we're using just native scrolling. And because we're using native scrolling and not working with touch start and mouse move and all that, we avoid many other tap click issues that we had. What also is kind of cool is just recently iOS Safari announced that they're removing the 350 millisecond delay was also a huge problem. So that's another big win for Ionic and all like mobile web app developers too.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. And it's just kind of unfortunate that something artificial like that gave mobile web apps such a bad name. And Apple's done so many awesome things for the mobile web, and Safari is really showing that. So this is kind of like the last big issue that I think was holding back mobile web apps.
Right.
And like we were able to get around it, but it wasn't quite ideal. But now I think it's just going to be a huge improvement going forward.
Yep, starting in iOS 9.3, I believe, we won't have to provide our touch start hacks to try to get a click to happen faster.
Right. So let's move on a little bit and talk about some of the awesome new design and visual changes and material design. What's going on there?
Yeah, cool. So when we built Ionic 1, we basically based it off of iOS 6. And then quickly iOS 7 came out. And in all that time frame, then material design came out. So because we've been out for 2.5 years and new designs have come out since then, we've kind of had to keep updating to stay up with the styles. And because of that, like the original CSS has kind of formed some cruff over time, and it's made it challenging to like override the CSS and the selectors. But because we've been able to, a lot of lessons learned of how to write well-written Sass and how to write, a large-scale framework, we've been able to restructure all the Sass completely separate. So iOS design and material design are two completely different CSS files, finalized files. And really, if you look at the source code, you'll see that they're completely different. Modular format that allows us to really take advantage of not having to override other styles. And with that, material design is like fully supported. So we've got this cool material design look and feel using the exact same markup that you were writing before. Something we tried pulling off with V1 and it worked somewhat well, but now like with V2, it's we've gone full on with it and it looks awesome.
Yeah, it's super awesome looking and beautiful.
Super awesome.
Yeah, it's just super awesome all around pretty much.
Yeah.
So with material design, we also get a few new fun components, right?
Yeah, so material design offers some really cool stuff like the ripple effect, the way the tabs work, and the highlight, kind of how that highlight.
The fab button.
Yeah, the fab button, chips.
I love chips.
Yeah, we all like chips.
That's great.
They're very candy oriented. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah. That's good. It makes me hungry.
So the candy oriented design, and then really the other one is like the dialogues. What material design calls dialogues, what we call modals, kind of has the same look and feel as exactly what material design would have.
Yeah, I mean, if you look V1 and V2, kind of compare them side by side, it's a pretty huge visual improvement. Like it just looks a lot more refined.
Yeah, really check out our V2 docs and check out the components, and you'll see a big difference.
Yeah, I think people are gonna add it to their app and kind of upgrade their app and be really impressed with just how much better they look outside of the box, but then they're even easier to kind of customize for your brand.
Right, yeah, a lot less CSS, which is a good thing because that allows you to customize it. And I've said it a million times, might have already said it in this cast, I don't know, but we don't want people building millions of Ionic looking apps. We want a lot of people building millions of apps with Ionic. And it's so far with Ionic 1, I feel like we did a good job with that, but I think it's going to be even easier with Ionic 2.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of the original goal with Ionic is we didn't want people just building a million iOS 7 looking apps. We wanted to let you build really custom ones. Like if you look at any major app, it looks custom. It's built for the brand. It's built for their style. So it's really important that you can change one variable and have your color red as like the header bar red. And you can customize it to have like maybe unique UI elements. So these are all the things that I think we really liked making easier, and I think they're even easier now. So
Yeah, and another thing I wanted to mention was Ionicons. Ionicons 3.0, actually, we've added or Ben has added over 900 icons that
he's been busy. He's been very busy.
Yes, been very busy.
Very busy.
Over 900 icons. But what's cool about it is that there's a one-for-one reference between Material Design and iOS. So you can write once that I want to use the home or the star or the favorite icon, and it's going to have that look and feel for the platform it's on. So again, your markup is written one way. You only have to worry about it once. But Ionic is able to switch it out depending on the brand.
Right. So you can kind of just do like, icon tag and then the name equals home. It'll figure out all like the complicated class names and everything. It's just simpler.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So a lot of new icons, much simpler template syntax.
Absolutely.
So let's wrap up the design stuff. There's a few other things that have changed. We'll let you kind of figure them out and find them and have a wonderful time discovering all the cool new stuff. But let's quickly talk about native controls and native functionality. So as some of you may know, and we did a terrible job kind of promoting this, but we had a project, and we still have a project for Angular1 called ngCordova. And ngCordova was a side project that kind of grew out of the community, basically trying to make Cordova plugins have things like promise support, things like triggering Angular digests. And when we started building this simple wrapper, here's how you can take a photo with a camera plugin and then have it, trigger the digest and update your app. We realized it was such a common pattern for all these different other plugins that the community, rallied around it and submitted a ton of new plugins. So there were some downsides with ngCordova, and I think one of the biggest ones that you guys have probably felt the most is it required a lot of custom code. So we got into a situation where there were problems with ngCordova that were not problems in the plugin. And so it kind of created additional surface area that added to maintenance overhead. And with Ionic, we just, it kind of fell behind. So what we're doing with Ionic 2 instead is we've created this project called Ionic Native. And it basically wraps these native plugins, native functionality in a lightweight way that doesn't really add code, but basically lets you interact with Angular, lets you interact with any other framework that you might want to use, and provides promise support with native ES6 promises, and then observables for things that are going to kind of stream data like geolocation, watch position. And going forward, I think we want to add a ton more plugins, and this will be kind of a new project for us. We've been a little bit quiet about it, but expect that to be a default in all of your starters as we kind of roll it out.
So it's kind of more of a generic way to get these applications or get these Cordova plugins into Ionic, but really just not specifically for Ionic.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the big misconceptions with Cordova apps is what they can do natively. A lot of people don't understand that you can do anything. You have direct access to the native layer. You can even do things like show native views, like a Google Maps native view in your app. So you really can do anything and everything that a native app can do. And now it's up to us to make it easy to integrate that, but in a way that's not kind of creating additional maintenance work. So that'll be rolling out, and I think people will really like it. It'll be very easy to make your own plugins.
Yeah, cool.
And one more thing about that is it comes with TypeScript support. So you'll get auto-completion. So you'll be able to say camera, get picture, and it'll give you the right arguments. And that I think will be really cool.
Yeah, and something we haven't mentioned so far is everything is modular in the sense that it's all in NPM. So we want to add these new versions of the different plugins. It's going to be just upgrade the version, and so it's not this kind of ad hoc way of updating versions. It's now kind of a standardized NPM stuff.
Yeah, that'd be really nice. So let's move on a little bit and talk about build tools, because for those that have kind of ventured into ES6, TypeScript, etc., there's all these different tools now. There's all this terminology people need to learn, like a bundler, a module loader, transpiler. What does it all mean, and what are we doing for?
Yeah, it's never ending, and we could easily do a multiple-hour show about this. This last year and a half, there really has been there's been a lot of churn in the whole JavaScript community of how to figure this all out. So we put a lot of time into this to try to figure out where's that sweet spot of making this easy, so that developers can worry about writing their applications and not spend hours and weeks trying to figure out which tool do I use? This tool is a fraction better than this tool, but this now replaced with this one, but it's not compatible with this one. It's really never ending. But I think what we've kind of come up with now is a great combination of build tools that we're continually trying to improve.
So when they go and someone starts an Ionic 2 project,
Right.
what kind of build tools do we give you? The package, like what do we give you out of the box?
Okay, so as of today, we're using WebPack and Sass together. Well, WebPack is standalone, and that's this new system that now like pulls together all these different imports and bundles into one big file, which was really not really a thing that was required with Angular 1 because Angular 1 provided its own modular system. But now
that
that's
didn't really work with anything else.
right. It worked with Angular, and that's all it needed to work with,
Yeah.
and that just kind of fell apart after a while. But with the new system and using ES6 modules, we're using Webpack to kind of bring them all together in a standard form. And we recommend using CommonJS, and that's how all of our starters are set up. And then we use Sass as still kind of a separate build process because we realize there's many different solutions out there. There's PostCSS is another kind of new one that we're keeping an eye on. It's really kind of cool, but really nothing has showed us that anything is better than Sass. We really enjoy using Sass. The community is already using it. It's the most widely used preprocessor.
Yeah, Sass kind of feels like just better CSS. I think that's probably why it's been so successful.
And what's cool is like it is just CSS. So that means you don't have to be a software developer to know how to use it. So web designers can easily step in. In-house developers can easily come in and design the app for you. So as the web developer is working on the application, designers can be working on the look and feel of things.
So I just want to touch on one thing that I love about the new module system that's just kind of part of ES6 future is that you really can just go to NPM and find a module that's been kind of exported in a friendly way. You can type npm install this thing, like let's say you have a calendar component. And now you can just go in your code and like import that calendar component, and the build tool will properly bring that in. So there's no more like Bower. Bower worked pretty well compared to what we used to have to do, but you don't even have to go and copy and paste like scripts into your repo. It just kind of works. So I think, and it's easy to reproduce and like rebuild an environment. So really, really cool.
And what's cool about this new modular system is with Ionic 1, you kind of got it all. But now with specifically Webpack and picking apart like, well, I'm using this one and I'm using this one, it customizes its own bundle for you.
Yeah, and so let's be clear about Bower. We're no longer going to be using that. So if you're relying on it today, we recommend you start moving into NPM. We publish official Ionic 1 and 2 NPM modules for just the library. So definitely recommend switching to those.
And same thing for Ionicons. That's now an NPM module too.
Cool. So let's wrap everything up. I think as people start to look into Ionic 2, there's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of cool apps being built. I think the initial reaction from our early alpha has been really positive.
It's been going great. Yeah.
I think people get what we're trying to do. They get the improvements. There's probably a little bit of overhead just switching to Angular 2, but it seems like once you kind of get over that like 1 day hurdle, it's like, okay, I get this. It makes sense. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, exactly. It's again, like Angular 1, the stuff you love about Angular 1 is still there, but now it's just easier to use.
Yeah. And looking forward a little bit, I think we are really going to be pushing using Ionic not only for native apps, but also for mobile websites. Google has been doing a lot of interesting changes with their search algorithms where great mobile web experiences are being ranked more highly in Google search. Google search isn't going anywhere. A lot of mobile web traffic is still out there. They just published some data that said something on the order of 60% of people who visited a mobile web kind of interstitial that forced you to download the app, 60% of them just completely abandoned it. So if this is a bigger macro trend where retailer is pushing someone to download the app and losing 60% of their traffic, I think like the future is really going to have a lot of mobile web apps being built to kind of make sure we're not losing these users. So Ionic is going to be ready for that. We're already ready for it. That's going to be something that we really push hard on.
Yeah, Ionic 2 really, Ionic in general, just has a huge advantage. Being able to run great on the mobile web, being able to run great in Cordova and be pushed into the App Store. It could even be a desktop application. So there's an enormous opportunity with using Ionic.
Right. So I think it's going to be really exciting next few months. We hope you enjoy the beta. If you have any issues, please let us know in the repo. Try out the demo apps. Let us know if you build anything with it. We'd love to blog about it and promote it. And I think you're gonna love it, and we hope that you have a great time with it.
Yeah, and thank you so much for making Ionic success. I mean, we can't thank the community enough. Like we're blessed with how many people just like help us out. Thank you.
You guys rock.